Hello friends, we're going to start on Chapter 3 of What Was the Alamo. Chapter 3, Rumors. The fighting was over for now. That's the way it seemed to the army of the people. Many returned to their families for planting season. Others left to help capture Matamoros, a Mexican port city. They marched out of the Alamo, taking horses, food, ammunition, clothing, blankets, and medical supplies. Among the rebels who stayed, discipline was a problem. They were bored, which led to drinking, gambling, and dancing the night away at fandangos, parties. In January, there was an alarming rumor. Santa Anna was returning to Bejar with a large army. The Mexicans were not waiting until spring to fight. They had started from Saltillo, 350 miles away. On hearing the news, people in Bejar started to leave town. On January 19th, a small group of about 30 more rebels arrived at Bejar. They were wet, dirty, and tired. A man named Jim Bowie was among them. Bowie had been securing troops at a nearby fort in Goliad, Texas. Bowie, however, had not come to help defend the Alamo. His order from Sam Houston was to destroy it. Houston did not think the Alamo could be held by the Texian soldiers. It had not been built as a fort. It was not on high ground. It was out in the middle of the fields. That made it hard to defend. The Alamo also covered a large area. About 3 acres. The walls were made of adobe, a mixture of straw and mud. They could withstand Native American arrows, but not cannon fire. Sooner or later, the rebels would be forced to surrender, so Houston wanted to move the cannons out and then destroy the buildings. By the time Bowie arrived, James Neal, now the leader at the Alamo, had begun to think this was the best plan. Jim Bowie. Jim Bowie, he was a fighter, a fearless and mighty adventuring man. So went the theme song of the 1950s TV show based on Jim Bowie's life. Jim Bowie grew up in the tough sugarcane region of Louisiana. He and his older brother learned to shoot deer, trap bears, break mustangs, and even ride alligators. When Bowie grew up, he made a lot of money in shady dealings in the slave trade and land purchases. He was 6 feet tall and a good fighter. He was a big drinker, too, and known for picking fights. He once murdered a man with the special hunting knife he carried. It became known as a Bowie knife. He moved to Texas and married into a Tejano family. He loved Texas and Mexican culture. Even after the death of his wife and children, he remained in Bejar until his own death at the Alamo. The Alamo. The Alamo was not just one building. It was a compound or collection of buildings surrounded by walls that varied in height from 9 to 12 feet. Parts of the outer wall had built-in stone rooms. To the left of the main gateway was the Mission Square, a courtyard with barracks at one end. Cannons were located at several points along the walls that surrounded the Mission Square. To the right of the main gateway were other buildings, including the chapel. It had its own courtyard. The roof of the chapel had caved in, but still offered enough support for cannons to be placed on top of it. Beside the chapel were pens for cattle, a horse corral. There were also the long barracks, 2 stories of rooms that housed soldiers and served as a hospital to tend sick and injured rebels. And that's the end of chapter 3. We'll get started on chapter 4 next time. Bye.